Okay, we are live. And then let me go to refresh. Okay, it is working. And then I'll wait a couple of seconds until some people get on. Then also, so even for like the for the Small Business Development Center, this could be a really good tool for them even.
Yep, I can see that
Start.
for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. If you have any questions in the meantime, let me know. Today, I have with me Chuck Edwards. He is with the Small Business Development Center here in Lubbock. If you don't know what the Small Business Development Center is, you need to know. So one of the biggest things that I always see on social media, especially in groups like That's Alive or the mom groups around, or even like the recommendations of Lubbock businesses and small businesses, a lot of people want information on how to start a business, or is there an entity that can help them start a business and they don't know what to do or how to go about starting that business. Well, that's what the Small Business Development Center is. They are a great nonprofit that helps as far as figuring out if you should go with that line of business, how to start the business. And even whenever I've talked to Chuck before, he had a cool not idea, it's a tool that they use about street traffic and figuring out if the brick and mortar should actually be placed in that location. So overall, it's a great tool. So I wanted to bring Chuck on to my platform because I always see that question. And not only do I think my clients could benefit from it or my followers could benefit from it, I think there's so many more people out there that will be able to see this that will also be able to use that information. So Chuck, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I know your schedule's crazy, as mine. So thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to be here. So first, I want to start with who are you, and then we can get into what do you do.
Okay, you bet. Well, thank you, Cassandra, for having me here as well. We've done a few things here and there over the months, and it's a great connection, and I appreciate all the nice words. And hopefully, by the end of this next 45 minutes or an hour or so, people out there will have an even better idea how we could help. So I do appreciate you inviting me, having me on. My name is Chuck Edwards, and I am the regional director for the Small Business Development Center that's at Texas Tech University. And so we are supported and funded in part by Texas Tech and the state of Texas, but we are also part of America's SBDC network, or almost 1,000 support centers, some resource centers. And so that group also has SBA funding, economic development dollars, and anywhere else that we can find some additional financial support. And what it allows us to provide the very type of help you suggested, but at no cost. So our office provides one-on-one consulting. We could sit there and help a person work through an idea, can look at and understand all the steps that are needed to make that idea come into fruition. We have the one-on-one consulting piece. We also do some additional outreach and training as well, and those are available on our website. And you can take advantage of classes on QuickBooks or social media, websites, using websites or other tools. All of those things, we try to do our best to help out. And then we also additionally have the research piece you're talking about. Since we are connected to Texas Tech, have some fantastic databases and other types of ways that we can examine or help you make a decision about whether the brick and mortar at this corner is going to be better for you than the brick and mortar at this other corner. And we can use, of course, demographic information, Census Bureau information, but we can also use our BIDC department can use pedestrian traffic data that you can gather from smartphones. It's pretty crazy what's actually out there. And so the more of that research you do, the better prepared you are going to be for what you're going to expect in your business in the first months or years. And so we try to help fill that gap and be that resource for people. So
That is so awesome. And it's needed because there's so much information online and there's so many courses. Yes, there's some amazing courses out there that I've even purchased, but then I've also purchased some courses or some mentorships, I guess I should say, that the SPDC, Small Business Development Center, can also do, but they do it for free. So if you really need that guidance, this is the place to go, and it's local. Do you help others that are outside of the area, or is it just here in Lubbock?
That's a great question. Okay, so the network overall, the 1,000 or so SBDCs across the country, somebody somewhere is going to be able to help you, right? And so even if you move to another state, you can move to Puerto Rico and there's an SBDC there that can help you. So that's one way to answer the question. There's probably an SBDC somewhere. Now, Texas is so large, we have it broken up into 4 sections, and we're part of the Northwest Texas region. And so the entire Northwest Texas region has different groups and categories. And the Lubbock office handles Lubbock and the 15 surrounding counties. And so then we have another place in Amarillo, another center in Odessa. Those are all hosted by Texas Tech. So we're part of the same unit, but we're part of an even bigger unit. So no matter where you're at, you can get help. And in Lubbock specifically, you mentioned it being local, they've been here for 35 years. Now, our funding doesn't allow us to, because we get federal dollars, grant dollars, and things like that, we're not allowed to promote or market ourselves with those funds. So we have to rely on referrals and word of mouth and great, partners like you to help get the word out, because otherwise people would not even know there's this free resource out there that they could take advantage of. So
Right.
absolutely,
Yes.
you can get help no matter where you're at. If it's a small little town and you're wanting to open a little restaurant or open a convenience store in that little town, and we can help you just as much as we can. And we do a lot of things Zoom, so we're not have to drive to Lubbock every time to meet us. There might be an occasion or two you would rather have a in-person type of conversation, but we try to work and understand that that's not always an option.
And then as far as it goes for somebody, like if they're interested in the services from the Small Business Development Center, let me see. I'm going to pull up the link and put it in the comments. So that way, if anybody needs it, they can register.
Yep.
Okay, so as far as it goes, one second, I have some comments coming in. So I want to make sure that they get on. Sorry, I'm sharing the live to a few people. I'm sharing the live to a few people. Okay. Sorry, I want to make sure they can get on.
No problem.
Okay. I want to make sure it's accessible. Okay, so on the Small Business Development Center, you once you basically fill out a contact form, then how does it work for somebody reaching out to you?
You bet. So at our website, you'll see several tabs. One of them will pop up and it'll ask you make an appointment. Big blue button right in the middle of the screen, and it'll walk you through that profile. There's no cost for anything, like I mentioned, but there are some statutes with the dollars that we receive where we're supposed to get some general information. It's all confidential. Everything we do and we talk with you is 100% confidential, but we are needing to gather some general information that we aggregate out for our in reports for our shareholders. So you you go hit the big blue button, start the process. It'll walk you through a profile setup. It will give us permission to talk to you essentially, and then it'll take you through a series of questions so we can try to match you with the best consultant based on what you've got. If it's a general one, it'll kind of round robin us to whoever happens to be available, and you're on the calendar. And then that first session, we'll learn more about. The more information you can give us beforehand, the better. But even if you walk in and you're not sure how to answer the questions, we'll talk about our services. We'll ask questions about what you've got going on, and we'll end up leaving that meeting. Generally, what happens is we leave that meeting with some some next steps. Okay, so Cassandra, you wanted to do this type of, you wanted to open, a little boutique store or something like that. And so then we'll say, okay, do these things so we can get some information about cost or customers or whatever that we feel like may be needed. And then that'll leave you some things to do. Then our office may be left with some items where we can gather some industry reports or something for that. And then we meet back up again. And if we're both feel like we're working toward a positive result, then there's no limit. It's not like you just get one or two sessions and that's the end of things. I have a client that I met with earlier today that I meet with about every 2 weeks for the past year. She started a business about a year ago, and it's just really fun to sort of see the progression and the overall maturity of kind of how she approaches whatever problem comes at her because she's now been doing it for 12 months. So we
And
try to
that's
help her
something
out.
you, right, that's something you always experience, right? Like as a business owner, it's not going to be perfect.
Yes,
If
absolutely.
anybody can tell you that, it is definitely me. Even yesterday, I was speaking to one of my mentors and I was like, look, like, this is what I'm going through. This is, like, what are your recommendations? And not just that, but the market shifts, right? So, with the market shifts, our economy's kind of been crazy. What worked a year ago didn't work 2 years ago, but is working now. So there's so many different changes. So y'all are also able to kind of track the market and see what the best options are.
Well, we do our best. We're not familiar with every single industry, and you're always going to probably be the expert of your industry. So we keep that in mind. But I think sometimes just having a person who's seen some things, heard some things, been through a few of those, like you said, ups and downs, we can offer you a person to talk to, a sounding board, so to speak. Also, her person that might help you brainstorm some ideas, and all of those are very valuable. I mean, as a business owner, sometimes you just gotta talk through it with somebody who has already solved some other problems. Might be different, but still, it is a process. And so we try to be there and help support during all of those stages.
And the best part, it's free. So
That's
if
right.
you're
Absolutely.
right, like you can't really beat that. So if it is something where you're having a hard time, then of course, you really can't not do it
Mhm.
because it's free. So you can't use money as an excuse, right?
Yeah.
And I know, sometimes whenever I've had those slow months that I'm really needing to reach out to someone, if, there's those mentorships like I've kind of talked about before that may cost $5,000 or $10,000, and that's a lot of money, especially as a small business owner, for you to take a risk on. So I don't necessarily recommend that. I think this is a much more legitimate way to handle a business and make sure that you're getting the correct help and the correct steps to make sure that you're one, staying compliant, two, of course, leading in the right direction of staying like with your mission and your values, because sometimes those mentorships can kind of take you away from it. Okay, so I
Oh,
have some
I want
specific.
to. You did say something that really speaks, I think, is a good point. I've kind of mentioned a general consulting and help in lots of different ways, which we do. But one of the things that we're really primarily recognized for is helping you get started. So we understand all the compliant pieces of what it takes to file an LLC paperwork, what's an EIN, what's this franchise tax report these people keep asking me about, what's the comptroller trying to get from me. All of those questions that kind of may feel overwhelming when you're trying to start out, we can answer those for you. So beyond just the specifics about maybe your business, we can also help you have a little bit more comfort level around those other things that are definitely going to be there that you may only do once, but you got to want to do them right. So we try to make sure we help you there.
Especially like taxes and things of that nature, because some of the mentorships I've been in, it never mentions taxes.
Mhm.
Never. So it'll tell you, oh, go start this business, but it doesn't say, hey, go get your EIN, or hey, go make sure you file to get your sales tax. And that's a huge issue that you could run into if you're not advised correctly. So I always recommend, if you're going to start a business, make sure you legitimately start it, because otherwise it can cause some bottleneck issues. And even I can talk about that personally, because and we've talked about this before at one of the events that we spoke at together. But the biggest issue was I was using QuickBooks Payroll. and it was a hot nightmare. And things like that, you know, I was like, oh, I'm just going to figure it out myself. Like, I'm very much so like that, that I just want to try to do it all myself. And some things don't need to be done yourself.
Mhm.
And payroll was one of those.
One of the common mistakes that I see, absolutely. Trying to wear too
Yes.
many hats, trying to be the payroll person, and really, you're better at the things you're good at. Do those and let somebody else do the payroll. Yep.
Yes, focus on your strengths and not your weaknesses, right? And then if you focus on your strengths, then of course your strengths will pay for your what you have to pay for with your
That's exactly
weaknesses.
right. That is so
Um,
true.
yeah. So as far as it goes, let me make sure I'm. It's showing that it's live on my side. I want to make sure that it pops up on everything else. I don't know why it's showing live on mine, but not for other people. Okay, let me see. Sorry, Chuck.
No problem.
Technology is
Mhm.
amazing sometimes. And it's weird that it's showing that I'm live on mine, but it's not showing it for others. Okay. I'm going to make sure. Okay, it's recording too, so I guess I can always repost it,
Yep,
but
you
I
can
want to
do
make
that.
sure. That is so weird. I don't know why it's not showing it. It's showing it to me. As it goes, 1 second. I have some comments coming in, so I want to get. It's showing it to me. I don't want me to share it. Social media, it moves so fast, and it evolves like every time there's a new update. I feel like every week.
Yes.
Social media, it moves so fast, and it. It won't even let me comment. Let me go to their comments and I'll tag Miranda. It won't even let me comment. Okay, let's try that. See if it works. Okay, we'll continue on with our questions. So we kind of talked about some of this, but I want to talk about 3 steps for someone that's starting a business before investing. And I feel like that's such a big aspect. So many people want to get loans and funding in order to start a business, but they don't go through the process like what you're saying, like checking to see how the footage is, or not the footage, but
Traffic.
the traffic for the location, you know. And so that was almost a big mistake that we were going to make on a business that we were talking about doing. We wanted to invest in a specific location, and then I talked to Chuck, and Chuck is like, hey, double check the traffic before you do that, and you even sign a contract for a lease because it might not be a good location. So that alone saved me a lot of money, because otherwise it can be pretty costly.
Yep.
And of course, once you're in those leases, a lot of business leases I feel like are 5 to 10 years sometimes, depending on the situation. And then of course there's so much that goes into a lease with a business. So that is overall a really good tip that you had gave me. But what are the 3 steps if someone wants to start a business that they should do before investing?
Okay. So when you ask this question, it's the before you start putting money into it, right? Your time is one thing, money's another. And so I kind of have 3 ways to sort of approach this. And one of them is going to speak to what you've already mentioned. One, you really need to do your homework, your research. Okay. Now, what does that mean? That means primary research. That means ask people about the people that you expect to be helping. You not people not your friends and family. They love you and want you to be happy, right? But no, ask whoever you need to. Hey, I'm thinking about providing this particular service. I want to provide this kind of type of product. What does it need to look like? If I want to have a hair salon, but I wanted to be open in these different hours or something like that. Ask around. Ask 100 people. I mean, random. It could be anybody going in and out of the hardware store. It doesn't really matter. Get permission and find a place to be. Give away a free, hot dog to anybody who will answer your questions, and gather as much information as you can, because that primary research can save you a lot of time. You can find out, well, I thought goat yoga was going to be a lot of fun and everyone was going to like it, but maybe it's going to not be as popular as you thought, right? And so. But that still may be a market for what you want, but you may realize during that research, you need to think about it differently to target these particular individuals, this particular age group, this particular part of town, whatever the case may be. Primary research, you do the research. Now that's primary, do it with your own feet, walk around and gather information. You'll never learn as much about your product from anyone else but the person who's considering buying it. They're making every decision in their head, or their service or whatever. If you're wanting to be a plumber, tell me, well, what it matters? Is it matter, being available all the time or being dependable and whatever? You'll get a real sense. And there's a wide spectrum of what you'll find. And you need to figure out whether your philosophy, you talked earlier about your philosophy, your core mission. Well, you gotta match to the people that want to spend the money and give you their support. So. But there's also secondary research, right? So this is where I talked about doing the pedestrian traffic, or just learning more about that particular industry, understanding that industry is on the decline, right? Like if there's a lot of people that are interested in food trucks, right? But I can share that industry is on a decline compared to where it might have been a few years ago. Had a big, nice boom, a few years back, but now it's leveled off, maybe even declining. But they just changed the major requirements around that in the last month. July 1st.
Yes.
So all of a sudden now that changing, you talked about things changing. 1 month it's one way, the next month it's something else. 6 months. Now that idea that might not have been the best idea 6 months ago, now all of a sudden it can be something that's more doable, because you're not required to have a commercial kitchen to prepare your food. That alone might have made the difference in making that decision, right? So do that research. So that's one step, okay? The second one, I say build out a plan. Now, you talked about this change. Everyone here and everyone that might ever watch this understands that plans change. And as a business person, the plan will change sometimes on you 3 times in a day, right? Okay. But not having a plan is worse than anything. And I mean, have a plan that takes you through your finances for at least 2 years. Understand at least what you believe your seasonality is going to be, when your strong months are going to happen, when you're and you try to mirror or match the numbers with what you thought was going to happen. And then if it didn't have that, they didn't follow through, try to figure out why, because the next year it'll even be easier. But you're always working off a plan. Got to have a plan. Okay.
Yes.
And then you do this, you can do all that without spending $1. Right? You don't have to devote 10,000 or 5,000. The third
right.
one is an extension of what you had mentioned, and I'm very happy to hear you say generally the importance of mentoring. You've mentioned it a few times. I'm going to say start early, building a support team. Okay, people will jump off and start networking to try to make sales. Great, everybody needs sales. Revenue is important, but I think early on, before you get too far into anything, find some people that do what you want to do. That doesn't mean they're going to be your direct competitor. Sometimes, there's a collegiality sometimes amongst people that you're not really doing the same thing they are, right? But they know they've been there, they've done it for years. There's an association or like we're talking about food trucks, food truck group, whatever. All of those kinds of connections that you can make. Ask questions, learn what works, learn what didn't. There'll be some people who will be happy to share their journey with you. And the more of that you learn, or just the support team you've got, whenever you're like shaking your head, going, "What in the world should I do here? They just canceled our big event and they had this all planned and all this food. And so now what do I do?" You'll have some people that, if you've tried to build it already, you'll have a team of support around you that can at least keep it from feeling completely by yourself. So those would be my three things, and they can all be done without spending hardly any money, and they will pay dividends over and over and over. That's my
Yeah. Yeah. And most definitely, one that I would say too is, whenever you're talking about the plan, that is something that is harder to, it sounds so easy to just make a plan. And there's so much that goes into it, like a market analysis, things of that nature. But there are so many resources that you can make that plan. But like what Chuck is saying, even looking at and thinking about those slow months, that's something I had to learn the hard way. It wasn't necessarily in my business plan thinking about what was going to be a slow month, right? And those slow months will come. That's why even in the credit industry, whenever I work on people's credit, they're like, "Oh, well, I had a slow month," and they're a business owner. Like, I don't know how many of my clients are business owners because those three things that Chuck just mentioned were not thought about in advance. So 100%, it's really, it's not even just something that you should do. It's essential.
it's
Like this,
essential.
it's like your life depends on it,
Mhm.
because one of those months could break your business,
Yeah,
and
yep,
100%, 100%,
absolutely.
it could break
So
it.
I would even add, you were mentioning the um, these like are essential, right?
Hmm.
But the plan itself, the more detail you got, the better, right? Doesn't mean it has to be right, but go ahead and take that extra time to figure out what are you going to have as a second thing or a third thing, because at some point it could be, like you said, the difference between really going off track and being able to kind of sustain that low period. And when I'll sometimes I'll have a client come in, "Oh, I've got a business plan together," and okay, great, let's take a look at it. And they've got some general information, but there's not a lot of depth to it. And when I'm talking about a plan, I mean like every month, 24 months, what is going to happen? Here's my expenses. Think about your cash flow, all of that. The more you do it, I had a client just recently was finishing up a pretty healthy project she was wanting to do. And she came in better prepared than the vast majority of the people. She was really trying to get it right. But she told us just earlier, like this week, after a month, she goes, I can't believe how much better I understand what I might have to deal with. And she was one of the most prepared people that I have worked with in a while. But she even realized when we went through it and we asked her questions and she had to respond and give answers to why she made the assumptions she did in her own plan and whatever. Then she just walked away realizing, wow, I mean, if I hadn't done this, man, I'd have been just like you. I'd have been learning some of this the hard way.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and it costs a lot of money because whenever you're learning life and finances just on a personal basis, and you're working with your personal finances, yes, you have a risk, right? Like you have your personal credit, and then you also have, of course, your own finances. You could lose your home, you could lose your car if your business went south, right? And that's something that people don't really think about, is if you are all in on a business, then it could really go downhill just by 1 month. So for example, in the credit industry, a lot of my support group, right? How you had mentioned, I do have a support group, but for specific situations, they all mention like their slowest month is Christmas, and I have experienced a slow month in Christmas. However, the majority of the time, my slow months are right before school starts. And so I have now learned the hard way after one really bad before school. And of course, that's whenever I needed my money, right? I needed to buy my kids school clothes. But it came down to it, hey, do I make sure that my employees are paid, or do I make sure I'm paid because that's slow month? And that's something that a lot of people don't think about until you're sitting in there in that situation and you're trying to figure out where to get this money from. So planning, preparation is key. You can never research enough, I feel like. Even
Yep.
if you research some more, because
Because
it
next
can be
month,
rough.
next month they change some of the rules, and all of a sudden, everything is a better option at this point than it was.
Yes. Okay, let me see what's going on. It's still saying that it's going to start soon, but it's showing that I'm live on my side. I have some people that are messaging me because they have questions and they want to be in on it.
And we want them to be.
Right. Yes, I want their questions too. That is so weird. It's showing that it's still starting soon.
I have a button. I'm just going to ask because I don't know. I've never used this platform. So
Yeah.
stream this to your audience in the top right corner. But is that that looks like it's
that would be, yeah, that would go to your social media.
Okay.
Yes.
But I thought maybe I needed to do
Yes.
something, and you did something too. And
yeah, and it's showing that I'm live. I'm going to hit. See, but on here, I'm going to try going live on my phone and see if that works. So that way I can still include it. But then I can't see you. Okay. We'll just have to finish it out. That is so weird.
you have to
record it.
You can go ahead and answer it, and when they see the recording, they'll have the answers. Maybe if you can.
Yes. Yeah. I'm gonna send it so they can rewatch it, and then once they rewatch it, if they have questions, I'll send them over to you. Or we can do a second and whatever is going on with my social media. That's so weird because I literally have it pulled up on my laptop on the side where it's showing I'm live. So that's, oh well, technology. One of those things. Research some more.
Yeah, that's right. And
Okay.
Things change constantly, right?
They do. Okay, so then the 3 tips for existing owners. So even if you are talking to me, or like how you're talking to the food truck industry, right? Even I've seen, right, they just made the change too, where you only need 1 food permit. You don't have to have a food permit for every single county you're going to. You only need that one, and then it's supposed to cover like several counties too.
Okay, so let me offer a little bit on why that's even more important than it sounds. Obviously, that's a lot easier one instead of everybody, right? But what was occurring in many cities was that the local city was adding additional requirements and constraints on everything. And so now, because you can get your 1 permit from the state, that one local state or that one local city that you might be trying to work with can't sort of stonewall the process with unrealistic kinds of demands. And so it really did help that industry quite a bit.
Yes, when I saw it, I was thinking that was so cool because even whenever I went to Fredericksburg a couple of months ago, I was looking and this one food truck had all these different permits stacked. And I was thinking, that is insane. And to think how much money that cost on top of it. I mean, in the time that goes into all those permits.
Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so the 3 tips that you would have for existing owners.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of say, I'm going to answer this sort of. I know we talked about mistakes too, but I think they kind of go together. Don't fall into one of these pitfalls. I mean, I see lots, and I kind of, recently for another event, I kind of put together a list of, 10 things that we see all the time, red flags or problems or pitfalls. So I'm kind of using that to kind of give an answer because I have what I would consider 3, maybe 4, 3.5 kind of things that I see so often that you really need to understand where you're hurting yourself. Okay. And one is they try to wear too many hats. You mentioned that one. You were like I didn't even tell you that I was going to mention that, and you gave me that example yourself, right? So common. People, you're trying to bootstrap something, you're trying to like limit your expense, and all that is completely legitimate. But at some point, as soon as humanly possible, you want to stop doing that, because the more time you spend wearing those 4 or 5 different hats is less time you have that you can actually spend on your business overall, either making it more efficient or just building your clients or improving your existing situation, your efficiencies. All of that suffers by trying to do
Yes.
things. And that it doesn't even mean you have to be bad at it. Like we were kind of joking about the payroll. I'm with you. I would
Yeah.
never sit down and do payroll. I'm going to outsource that to somebody for $50, and I never have to think about it again, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there could be, there could be things you're really good at, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be always the one doing it, because other people need to be good at it, and other people can be good at it, and there's other things that you need to focus your time on. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say that's a suggestion. Make sure you're approaching, you're aware of that, and you're not making that kind of mistake. All right. So a second mistake, or second kind of bit of advice that I would offer is, you really caution yourself repeatedly, and ask as many. And this is where research helps, but do not price your services or your products or anything out of fear. You need to do it out of value. Okay. I will see people give away their hard-earned knowledge, skill, and base. A mechanic that is the only one in Lubbock that can work this particular type of whatever doesn't need to be working for $25 an hour because he wants to stay busy, right? He
Mm-hmm.
needs to understand the value of what he has, right? Either in knowledge or skill or whatever else, right? Or location, whatever you're providing. A business will give away their price. They'll try to buy, they think they're kind of buying market share. And I'll give them a big discount so they'll be my first customer. Is that the customer you really want? Probably not, right? You want the people that are going to come back, or can or refer you to other people. If it's the kind of business you don't have return customers, you want that word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And that value, your value is not in a dollar amount, almost always. And the people that are going to make it all about the dollar, you're flipping through and you're buying toilet paper from Amazon. Okay, yeah, maybe that's where price is going to be the factor. But all the other kinds of things that we generally do in a small business setting is, you need to recognize your value. And that's where the primary research I talked about, I talked about doing it from a customer point of view, but you
Mm-hmm.
can also do that from, because you mentioned what works one month maybe doesn't the next. If you figure something out, I guarantee someone else is going to step in and start doing it at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to just recognize what it is that you provide. So I would say, don't forget that. Don't think you can discount your way out of a financial issue. Maybe that might be an answer depending on volume, but most of the time it's not. There are other
Right.
solutions that are better. So I would say avoid that temptation. It feels like a quick fix, and in reality, you're giving away. There's a commercial. I'm just going to have a little pet peeve moment here. Okay, so there's a commercial, and I don't even know who it is. I think it's Copilot or somebody talking about doing a business plan, and it's got a guy selling pizza, and he dreams up in his mind that he wants to be busy. So he, because when he does that, he decides he wants a $1 slice of pizza, and now of course he's busy, and I'm thinking, okay, is that really what the man needs to be doing? Is that really going to give him the profit he wants? It keeps him busy, and it's just in my opinion, it just understates very, very important questions, just so that he can say he's busy. You got a dollar pizza, you know. That might be what you want, but I want you to understand what you're doing and what it's going to cost you, and all the things that are required to make that pay off, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's companies all the time that'll have a loss leader, or they'll have you come in and they'll sell you Coke, a 12 pack of Coke, super cheap, because they know you're going to buy a bunch of other stuff. Somebody comes in and just buys the pizza, whatever, they may buy the pizza and they're gone, and you don't really get much out of it, but keep busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I would say do
Yes.
not price out of fear, price out of the value, right?
Yes.
Of what's
And
going
that's one thing I've learned too, right? Like I'm telling you, I've learned all the things the hard way.
on.
But whenever I very first started in the credit restoration business, I went to a conference and somebody asked me what my price was. And I started out at that time. I was charging $80 a month, and I did not charge an enrollment fee or nothing of that nature. Um, and then when I told this individual how much I was charging, she said I had crackhead prices, and I was so offended. So offended, but little did I know, right? And I learned my lesson again, right? So if you're learning anything, I could write a whole book about what not to do as
Let's
a
write a
business
book.
owner.
I'll do that. We can do that for sure, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I could write a whole book about what not to do as a business owner, and that is one of them. And you have that self-doubt as a business owner on not charging your value. And that was something, it took me a really long time, because I'm like, I'm not an expert, and here I was almost 3 years into the field,
Mhm.
where if you asked me, I even had banks calling me asking me how to fix their reporting issues. Well, if they're doing that, I
Yeah.
think I
You
know what I'm
really are an
doing.
expert. People will not,
But
because it's something they've been learning for years. That seems common knowledge, like everybody, but really they don't. People don't, and
mhm.
they got to go somewhere. And so you had a very common response. Well, or also there's a tendency sometimes with some business owners. Well, I want to try to help people. Well, that is a
Mhm.
fantastic thing to want to do. But at the end of it, if you're selling pizza, you got to pay for the restaurant, not just the pizza, right? So you got to make
Right.
sure there's enough there. And in your case, you got to have a way to make sure your kids go to school and all. And so you have to get what it is that is needed, or because none of us are doing this for volunteering, right? We
Right.
all have to make a living. That and that's just the way. Uh,
And there's still more
of
ways to help people.
yes,
I
yes,
mean, by increasing my prices, it allowed me to have more flexibility, to one, increase my systems to have more available time. And then once I had more available time, then I could volunteer more at places for free. So going and speaking at schools and helping kids understand finances and credit, to for example, like I spoke at Talkington, right? And I spoke to the seniors talking about credit, how they should start building their credit. So I was able to free up my time, instead of me trying to penny pinch and get as many of those $80 clients as possible. Then instead of me having one or like six $80 clients, right, I could have two at the current price I charge. So it freed up my time, but not just that, it also made people more responsible. So
yes,
in my industry, if you're, a lot of people ask, why do they have to pay $1.99 for their credit report to get a review? If you are not willing to pay $1.99 to get your credit report, or if you don't have it readily available, then you are not ready for my services. And as much as I would want to take all those clients, that is not good for business. So yes, so charge your value 100%.
I
And
agree
it's
with
hard, but have some self confirmation and affirmation, and just let yourself know that you can do this. And if you think about it, I heard I went to a conference about 2 weekends ago in California, and one of the things that really stuck with me was they asked, what makes somebody an expert? And to me, I have always thought, well, if I have a degree in it, right? Well, I have a bunch of degrees, but it doesn't mean I'm an expert in political science, right? Um, so it was saying that if you know more than the average individual, that considers you an expert. So
that. I agree
that,
with that.
that's kind of a thing.
You have additional or extra knowledge in an area that many people need help. And that's also average, by the way. So there are a lot of people out there that are well below knowledge level of average that need your help to get them. And you're at 75% or wherever you might put
Mm-hmm.
yourself. There's a big gap there, and that gap that people need help. And sometimes they actually want the help from somebody they feel is a little more reachable or attainable than some lofty super duper expert who wants to chart. You got to kind of recognize that role. And it's kind of
Yes.
interesting. I don't want to necessarily get too off track, but we've talked about our services being free, and that's fantastic. That's why they should take advantage of
Mm-hmm.
it. It's set up for that purpose. But we struggle with that because we'll end up taking up time on a client situation when they're really not that
Mm-hmm.
serious. We ask them
Right.
to do some things and then they don't come back. Well, then I thought, man,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people trying to get in to see me. This seems unfair to the people that really are waiting and couldn't because this other individual. So you have
Right.
to do that individually. You were able to sort of filter through which individuals want your help and which
Right.
ones
Yes.
just
Yes.
want you to do it. Because there's a big
Right.
difference between those things sometimes. So,
Mm-hmm.
yep, that's a very
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a lot of people, they, and this is another thing, they don't want me, they need me. Like, they need me to help their situation. But here's the other thing, they also need to have that want to help fix their life. And they're not going to fix their financial situation until they hit the bottom of the barrel. And it's harder being in their current situation than trying to actually go through the process and fix their credit and putting their finances where it needs to be. That's something that I've even learned over the past year
I'm
and a
telling you,
half.
Cassandra, we're going to write a book. We can just do this, right?
Right? We could
Yeah,
write a book.
series.
We could
Let's
write a
do a
book.
series every week for right here.
What not to do as as a business owner. I'm telling you, I have not even 10 mistakes, right? I could go through, shoot, I have a lot more than 10.
That's it.
I could walk you through the state of secretary process. I could walk you through how to get your sales tax
Yeah,
certificate,
yeah.
all of it, your registration, you name it. I've learned it. So yes. So then this kind of goes into the next one on the top mistakes that you see for new business owners, and we'll probably be able to have a little bit of extra time for you to add some for the top mistakes that you see business owners. And I know we've kind of touched on those a little bit, but you can add those as well.
Okay. All right. And then, I got a closing thing that I really hope we'll have some time for. But I would say in this particular case, and it speaks to something we've already mentioned, but it is extremely important, that it's flying blind with regards to finances or marketing. Hey, I'm going to put a couple $100 on Facebook and the world's going to be better tomorrow. But you don't really have a plan around it. You're just flying blind, hoping, right? Finances, I'm amazed at how some people will essentially invest their entire retirement, their life savings up to that point, and then when you'll ask them very basic questions about, well, what is your gross margin on your product, or what's your cost of goods sold? Very, very basic questions that they should know, like without even pausing, and they're not sure exactly what I'm asking, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't. That to me, it says, okay, we got some work to do because you want to get on top of that. And so flying blind with regards to finances. Here's the thing that has shocked most people. That first couple of 2 or 3 years when a lot of businesses, they struggle and I have a whole conversation me and you could have about how risky is it really to be a business owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But here's the thing. Most of the businesses that close in that first couple of years, they do not close their doors because they were not profitable. That's weird, right? People don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
They no, nope. They're making money. They're getting enough. There's enough profit there that they were doing okay, but they end up closing their doors because they run out of cash, or they run out of energy, or they run out of whatever else, right? And it's very,
Burnout.
it
Burnout is a thing. A
yes,
thing.
and it's counterintuitive to think that, well, if they're made profitable, then what's the problem? Why did they shut their doors? And it is because they didn't really have a plan together. They didn't understand cash flow. Cash flow is not the same thing as profitability. And then understanding that, and then being able to feel like you're controlling the situation around you, and it's not controlling you. It'll end up being the difference. And people will had one particular young lady working hard. She had good customers, had plenty of business, had good profitability when you looked at per contract, per invoice, all the things, from we were checking off, look, check, 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 check. But the one thing that wore her out to the point that she got about 2 years in, she was about a little over 2 years. She said, I'm done. And that was employees, because she had a very specialized amount of labor she needed that she expected. And every time she thought she just about had that solved, that person would leave, they would move, there would be somebody would, be out for medical. And so she couldn't keep her staff in place consistently. And she finally just said, I'm done, threw her hands up, said, I could do so many other things, and I am tired of trying to hire people, because she felt like all she was ever trying to do was try to hire people, and her whole business was suffering because of it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing, is like flying blind without a plan. That finances, around finances for sure, but all things definitely an issue. And then I would say another thing that happens that we people that are kind of entrepreneurial like you or me or whatever, we see things, we try things, we test things. We will sometimes mix up busyness with a plan, with a strategy, with a growth plan. Okay. And we'll be all busy doing a bunch of stuff, and wow, we're busy. At the end of the day, we're exhausted. But did we really do the things, the stuff we should have been doing to improve our business? All right.
Right.
Well, some people figure it out a little faster. We all learn it at some point, but some people, they don't figure it out very quickly, or they get to the point when, like, I'm just exhausted. I did this so I'd have a little more free time to myself, or I would have more control over my schedule. And then they realize they don't really have a plan around that. So those are two things that happen sometimes with younger businesses, newer businesses. They'll get busy. They're doing 1,000 things, but are they doing the thing they need to make sure their business is going to be as healthy as possible?
And being busy isn't necessarily always a good thing. So today,
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I'm working on right now is all my systemization to make sure that I am less busy. Being less busy does not mean that you're making a profit. So I want to make that very clear too.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Like just being busy doesn't mean you're making a profit the same way, right?
That's exactly correct. Yeah, that's a
yes,
great. I'm going to change the way I say it for those two things, because that brings home both possible options, occurrences that might be going on. And you talk about putting systems in place. That's the other big mistake I see a lot. It's all in somebody's head. Just you need to have it down where other people can do it, not just you.
Right.
You need to have it down so
Yes.
you can review it and look at it and improve it. You can't do that if it's in your head, and you can trick your own self about how good at something you are. You need to put the
Yes.
systems down.
And that's like where delegation goes into place, right? And kind of going back to that same thing, that you need to do what you're good at. But the other thing that I always try to consider is I think about my business as, is this something that I could sell? And could somebody acquire my business? Somebody does not want to acquire a business if it cannot be ran by itself. Because essentially, if somebody went and bought Rosas Financial and I did absolutely everything, well, that's not something that could be acquired, because I would be out of the equation. And then essentially they would just have a business and not know what to do with it.
Yep.
That's not something that an investor would want to invest in. Versus if you have systems in places that need to be placed and delegations where they need to be delegated, then at that point, that business can be acquired. And that's something that I didn't necessarily think about at the very beginning. See, this goes back to the million things not to do. I'm over 100. I could go probably to 1,000. And that's something that you really have to think about as a business owner, because in reality, yes, you could build your business and you could train your kids to take over your business, but a lot of people make a lot of money by selling their businesses off, just like that poppy drink, right? They just sold the poppy drink for, it was like three point something million dollars, and it's only been open not even a year. That kind of situation, that's delegated, right? It's where systems are in place to where somebody could just buy it and just completely take it over. If you kept it to where you're running everything on a daily basis and you're completely in the business and not working on the business, you may make $1 million a year, if that. You may be stuck at that 200,000 or 300,000, and that may be a lot of money to a lot of people. It's a lot of money to me, but if you look at the bigger picture, sometimes that's what needs to be done. If you're owning a landscaping company, but you're out there mowing the lawns, are you actually focusing on the growth of the business, or are you mowing the lawn, right? At that point, you can't sell your landscaping company if you're the one mowing the lawn. So that's kind of what I think about on a regular basis, is what can I do to make my business acquirable by an investor if I chose to do that?
That's an excellent point, because it's not as if you're ever going to sell it. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but the mentality that you're using to make sure you stay as on top of systems as possible, or efficient with things as you can, you're not settling for, well, that'll be okay, right? It's like you're trying to ask yourself, how can I make this better? How can I make an
Yes.
investor? Some magical investor maybe never comes along, or maybe it does, and you can retire, in 10 years and
Hmm.
whatever, and you don't, and that'll be perfect. That'll be a great ending.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's just another opportunity. A lot of people just think in that small box, oh, I'm going to build this business. But a lot of people don't think about that outside of, hey, this business could be made to be something that I could sell and make a lot more money than just keeping it with just me. And that's something that I always try to go by
Well,
whenever I think about any change, I guess I should
Well,
say.
it helps you also think about scale, right? By looking and thinking that, then maybe you can decide, well, do I really want to bring in two more people? Or do I want you already are part of the way there in that kind of analysis that you will not have if it's just you mowing the yard, like you said, right?
Hmm.
If you meet me in the yard and I'm happy and make a living, okay, that's great. I'm totally, if that's what you want, I'm right there behind you. I'm going to help you do it.
Yes.
But
Yes.
if you want to have something that's going to be a little bit larger scale and help you accomplish different kind of financial goals, maybe you need to have two or three teams that are out there doing something, and you need to be doing different things. So,
And that kind of goes into like entrepreneurship's not for everybody.
mhm.
Like for some people, and even like my husband, I like for him, like trying to explain some of the entrepreneurship thoughts that I get, it sometimes is not what he's thinking. And some people I feel like are good at doing what they want to do and just keeping it, whether it's a W-2 employee. And every day, sometimes I think about just going back to being a W-2 employee.
Yeah,
If you
there's
haven't
always
thought
there's always
that,
that hour every week. What in the world?
and that's just because as a W-2 employee, you don't have to think about all the extras. Like you don't have to think about taxes, you don't have to think about hiring. But that also comes back to delegating, right? If you delegate it, yeah, you still need to think about it, but you also have somebody in place that thinks about that for you and making sure that it's okay. Okay, so what are some of your other top mistakes? Do you have some more? We have about we could do like another like 6 minutes.
Okay. Well, I feel like those kind of cover the ones, but I do, since we have just that much time,
Hmm.
I want to kind of offer just a general bit of advice, right? As you're trying to roll the business out, think about the
Yes.
business, look at it. Okay. And it sounds so simple. You'll be able to tell me probably, yep, I've been there, because you've been through this.
I'm
It's so simple, but it is absolutely essential, important, critical even, that you keep it in mind. And that is small, one little piece, the piece of advice is little decisions add up, right? And they add up in a bad way, they add up in a negative way. And you may not think about it. You think, well, it's just this, just that. You're making a quick decision, you're busy, you don't think it through, boom, you make this decision. Now you add that to this other one, you add this to the other one. And the hard part is it can get away from you very quickly, right? So I try to use this one little kind of device to get people to realize that when I have had businesses throughout the years, and I had employees, and so I would try to get a manager kind of on board with something. And here's an easy way. Suppose you sell hamburgers for $10 a burger, right? You're nice, comfortable, mate. You've got nice customers. You've been there for years, or whatever. All right. So what happens if you spend $20 that you didn't need to? You just spent it because you wanted, the cute red version of the spatula instead of this, whatever the cheapest one was. So you spent $20. That doesn't seem like much, right? So if you do a little bit of math, you think, okay, if I spent $20, that's only $20. Two burgers, I've made my money back, right? No, that's not the way it works. Okay. Because what do you really have after you sell a burger? After you take out all the cost of everything, and you're lucky in most cases, if most businesses, not just burgers, but pretty much all businesses, 5% to 10, but 5% net margin at the end of the day, probably going to be happy with, right? You can do that consistently without a bad year or two, whatever. You're probably going to get people wanting to throw you a parade, right? So if 5% margin is all you make, okay, don't want to get too technical here with dollars, right? But
Hmm.
that means only 5 cents of every dollar drops to the bottom line, right? Which means you have to make 400 additional dollars in revenue to get your 5% net return, which is $20. So that $20 spatula that you colored, that was cool and you just loved it, now becomes a $400 additional costs that you've got to overcome just to get back the dollars that you spent that you didn't need to spend. Okay. So if you're selling burgers at $10 a piece, now that one spatula means you got to sell 40 more burgers just to pay for that spatula. So if you stop and make yourself stop, kind of recognize that, you realize, do I really need the cute one or not? Right. And, sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And you make decisions for lots of reasons. But the thing is, if you do a $20 thing here, then you make a quick decision here, you buy a little bit more expensive something or the other than you need it. You've just made every one of those makes it a little bit harder, a little bit harder, a little bit harder to kind of come to whatever financial goals you want. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And those you can't undo. Some of them you can't undo. Right. So you got to remember that, because those little decisions, they really add up. The good news is there's the flip side of that. So you make little adjustments here. Let's suppose you forgot a way to save $20 on internet at your office. Now, all of a sudden, that's X amount of less revenue you really got to have just to get the same amount. So you can make little adjustments here and there, and they can build, and they can have a very positive momentum as well. It's insane how, if you stop and let yourself think about it, how that will play out. And we all do it in a personal budget. You probably share a lot of the things you teach people is little adjustments here, $10 save here, save that, and you really start building momentum. Well, it's true in every setting, not just the personal household budget, but even in the business setting. And you may think, well, what's $20? I'm making $400,000 a year selling burgers. Okay, it sounds like you should have plenty of room for $20. It's not that you don't have the capability to spend the 20. But why do it if you don't need to? And now you just made yourself sell more burgers, right?
Yes, right.
And that might be an entire lunch run. An entire lunch run of 40 burgers now has to be spent, or has to happen for you to be able to spend that $20.
Right. Yeah, because you have other overhead expenses too. So, of course, like in my sector, in a lot of companies right now that are all remote, we still have things. So a spatula could be Calendly, like using the calendar app, right? That's $20 a month. Or for example, like StreamYard that I'm using right now, that's $40 a month. It can even be up to $2,000 a year, depending on which setting you decide, or which features, or your subscription you choose. So things like that, like, should I have the basic or should I have the $2,000 a year program? And those necessarily aren't that important to me. So whenever I'm looking at my cost and with my profit margin, I include all that information, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people forget about, is whenever you're looking at your overhead, you need to look at everything: your taxes, your subscriptions, payroll, right? Your lease, like all of that goes into your pricing in order to figure out your profit margin. And so that's something that's very, very crucial, because some of those things, like for example, Canva, it's only $120 a year. That's something that's really small and could be forgot about, but it's still important whenever I'm looking at my price per person that I should calculate to make sure that I'm charging enough to not only cover my profit margin, but also cover my overhead expenses.
Yep, that's exactly right. And there's all kinds of ways to look at that. A small decision, we're talking about cost, but there's also decisions you make about an employee or like a customer, and you see that customer comes up, well, I'm going to let them have a free drink because they're, because it's Wednesday free drink Wednesday. See, everyone will love me. Well, you just gave away a lot of revenue that you can't get back now. So it can look at it from all sorts of angles. We're talking about with an employee, hey, they need to leave and, early, and we'll count it like you work here anyway for 40 hours, even though they didn't. That's an hour's worth of, you got, and it's not like you can't make those decisions because you want to have a good working environment or whatever else, but you just need to understand what those decisions have required from you now as a business.
Right. And even hiring an employee, right? You want to make sure if you hire an employee that it's actually going to pay for itself. And then, of course, your profit. That's something you should always think about. And that's that's whenever it gets a little bit more difficult. You're growing, you're scaling, right?
Mhm.
But that's something that I was taught in my master's program that has kind of stuck with me. Okay, if I'm hiring this person, I may take a loss today, but in 3 months, is that going to pay for itself and then give me enough to scale and even grow more?
Yep, and
So
that's where your
that's a
margin
big thing.
matters, and that's where your margin matters, because if you sell them the $10 burger and you have your cost to make the burger, you really only have $5 left. Then they're hiring that person. If they, well, they'll be there for the lunch run, and I can make $5,000 with them. But you mean 5,000 gross? You mean 5,000 after your net, after your gross margin? What do you need? You need to make sure you're answering those questions honestly to yourself, because you might find out, wow, that new employee means I've got to bring in an extra $4,500 each day in revenue for lunch or whatever the case may be. I mean, per month for revenue, and that may be worth it, or it may not. It may change your mind, or you may need to wait and scale up later. It's just all of those. They just add those kind of decisions, just build on themselves. And if you don't try to stay on top of it, and here's the hard part: most of the time you have to make those decisions without a lot of time to do it and without a lot of information. So
Yes.
you don't have a perfect scenario where you can compare A to B to C and put a nice little pros con sheet together. You've got to just kind of in your gut kind of understand what that's going to mean for your business, and are you willing to take that chance or not?
And make the numbers make sense, right? I mean, the numbers, if any business person, if you don't know numbers, you need to find somebody that is good with numbers, because that was one of my biggest issues. Was I was always terrible at math. Like, I was really bad at math. I made a C in college algebra, so just a heads up there. However, I made an A in my corporate finance class because it's a different type of math. So you may not understand a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's a different thing over there.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're looking at corporate finance and with businesses, it's much more simple. And if you can put it into a good spreadsheet, it can really make sense. And I mean, that's one of the biggest thing. I love spreadsheets, but that's also one of the things that was taking up a lot of my time. So now I have my CPA. But yes,
Yep.
it can take some time. Bookkeeping takes time, right? Going back to payroll, that was a whole nightmare. So those kinds of things, I'm not an expert in taxes, so that's a big delegation for a lot of people. But you should still be able to know your numbers as a business owner, even if somebody else is calculating them for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you believe that and you hope that they're always going to be trustworthy. But what if they make a mistake and you don't know it, or they aren't trustworthy? That happens too, right? So
Yes, quality control.
you're the one
Quality
that's
control.
responsible for the information. Absolutely.
Right. And that, I mean, I've kind of experienced something similar to that just recently in my business with one part of my business that I do delegate and outsource. Specifically, I had to do quality control on it. And you have to make sure you're watching things like that, because at the end of the day, if something went south in that nature, it's not that person that's going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble. So you want to make sure that if you do hire a CPA, or if you hire a tax person, which is a really bad industry right now, you have to be extremely careful. It's I would say equivalent, if not worse, to the credit industry with scammers. I know even the other day on social media, I seen that there was a huge tax scam that had gone on, and 3 people got thrown in prison, and it's going to be federal prison. And the amount of money that is going to have to be paid back is insane. So
Mhm.
not only are the people who filed the tax returns going to jail, but the people who own the businesses that use them to file those tax returns, they are also in trouble, because at the end of the day, it's their taxes.
Yeah.
And so that's something big that you should always double check. Make sure you're watching that your reports are being filed, your taxes are correctly being filed. Yes, as an entrepreneur, have my taxes been perfect? No, they haven't. But that's why I delegated it, right? But now I know I need to watch them and make sure that everything's being filed correctly. Because I don't want to end up on Lubbock mugshots, to say the least, for tax evasion.
No kidding. Totally
No
agree.
kidding. So thank you so much for doing this today. So just to finalize it, if you have one piece of advice, even if it's just something super short, what is one piece of I can't even talk today. One piece of advice that you could give for every entrepreneur that's either starting or growing a business?
Do your homework. Do your homework before you even start spending money. Do your homework while you're starting your business. You go back and look at everything you've done after your first year. You've got to make sure you give yourself the proper time to do that. Don't squeeze it in for an hour once on a Saturday because you finally found an hour. You need to have some dedicated time for that. And the homework can change based on what's going on, but you need to make sure that that's not getting lost in the shuffle of all the things that happen. So that's before you spend any money. That's after you get going. That's after 3 months because it will be different. And the only way you can stay on top of it is if you're checking it, measuring it, keeping track of it. That's the only way you'll be able to respond.
Yes, that's great advice for sure. And of course, if any of our followers need help, like I said, you can reach out to the Small Business Development Center. Like Chuck said, if you're not specifically in this area, because I do have followers from other states and regions, then of course you can get connected still and they can redirect you to the correct place.
Yep.
And then
America's SBDC, if someone just wants to search America's SBDC .org, that'll get you to a site where it'll search what one is close to you. And
okay. And I'll include it down in the captions below as well as the description. So that way, if anybody needs that information, they can go there. Like Chuck said, this is a free service. So don't waste the money that I did by not using that. If I would have known about it sooner, then I absolutely would have used it. And now that I know Chuck, there's of course things that I always ask him whenever I'm seeing him, like, hey Chuck, like I let him know one of our business ideas. And then of course he talked to me about the foot traffic and things of that nature. And then I started researching it and I was like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't look at that location. So those are really good tips. So this is, like he said, free, so you have no reason to not use it. I know I have several people always in my inbox asking if I can help create an LLC, if I can help establish a business or help them grow their business. I have no problem helping answer any of those questions. However, this is a great resource for somebody starting their business or for growing their business. So it's stupid not to use it, especially when it's $0.
Yep.
So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And then, of course, Chuck is an amazing individual. They also have a great team at the Small Business Development Center here in Lubbock. They even have access to funding. Not necessarily the Small Business Development Center does the funding, but they are partnered with a couple of different banks. Are you still partnered with People's Fund?
Yes.
So People's Fund.
We're very familiar with what they want from the underwriters want, so we can help you put together the package that you and help that conversation with them maybe go a little easier because we know what they're looking for.
And by that time, whenever you're having someone recommending a business, right? Or if say Chuck is like, yes, we need to go get business funding for that, at least you've already known that you've done step 1, 2, and 3. So you're not just investing before you just go and start an idea without actually planning it. So
Yep.
by that time, Chuck has already helped you with your homework essentially before you're just jumping into funding.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of the banks you go to, the first after they've talked to you, if they think that you really might have something, they'll often tell you, hey, go to the SBDC so we can get you a business plan together because they want to see that final business plan.
So, yeah, and every business plan is different. Some business, depending on the industry, for example, if you're looking at an investment option for a real estate, or like say you're trying to buy a flip and you're wanting to buy a home in order to remodel it and then sell it and make a profit off of it, that's going to be a completely different business plan than a food truck, for say.
Yep.
So they can help with all of those routes. So as I mentioned, I will drop all the links below. I've already put in the comments one of the links for the local Small Business Development Center. But just remember, entrepreneurship is an amazing journey. Yes, you can have some crazy times as I have, and maybe I need to get with Chuck and talk to him about writing a book. But essentially, it is possible, and you can put whatever you can achieve whatever you put your mind to. Just make sure whatever you decide that it will be okay, and there are resources out there for you, and this is a great one. So I will be back. I have another option coming, or not another option, I'll have another educational video coming, and it will be over all of auto and lending purposes for buying a car, or say you're upside down in a vehicle. It will all help with that. So if you need anything, as always, I'm your favorite credit girl, and this is Chuck Edwards. Thank y'all for joining us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me. And then, of course, Chuck will be available as well. But I hope you have a great evening. Thank you so much, Chuck. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Yes. Tell your wife I said hi, and I hope she's doing amazing too.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes.
So much.
Okay. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.